Morning class, this is Brittany Smith, and this is our last discussion involving the text. So we are asked 3 questions. I'm going to answer question 1 and question 2. Question 1 asks, discuss how the cases of John Brown and Eb Cade illustrate the effects of racial ideology on medical research. First off, John Brown, he was a former slave named Fed, whom escaped slavery and lived his life in England. He wrote a memoir recalling his prior slave master having an illness, which was cured by a doctor known as Thomas Hamilton. In return of healing his illness, his slave owner gave Dr. Thomas Hamilton permission to conduct research on him. Brown suffered from 3 significant research projects. One involved John being exposed to extreme heat so Dr. Hamilton could find a treatment for sunstroke. The second experiment involved Dr. Hamilton making Brown bleed every day. However, the text did not indicate the purpose of the study. And the third, mentioned on page 252, involved Dr. Hamilton burning John to observe how deep his skin went. And then Eb Cade, he was a truck driver in 1945 who was a victim of a serious accident. The doctors assumed he would not survive his injuries. They were also under a contract with the U.S. Atomic Energy Commission and were waiting for an opportunity to conduct an experiment involving injecting plutonium and testing the effects on a moribund patient. And this is noted on page 253 of chapter 10. Without having Eb's consent, these doctors injected plutonium into him despite the fact that they did not know what exactly was going to happen. The doctors also pulled 15 of his teeth and extracted bone chips from him. He ended up escaping from that hospital 6 months later and survived his injuries. And the book noted that, that there was no complications from that plutonium that he knew of anyways. So going back to chapter 2 on page 41, racial ideologies is defined as a set of principles and ideas that 1, divides people into racial groups, and 2, serves the interests of one group. I related the biologic racism ideology to these cases on page 143, where it's defined as the idea that whites are genetically superior to non-whites. So the effects of racial ideologies such as biologic racism on medical research is that these doctors felt superior over their patients. Furthermore, they did not see their patients' humanity, which encouraged them to torture Brown and Cade without feelings of remorse. So that's kind of what I said there. And then question 2 asks, African Americans have higher rates of physical illness than whites, yet lower rates of mental illness. Explain how this pattern might be the result of individual racism. Okay, first off, I have to say that the book noted coping skills, which are a mental illness. So I was kind of frustrated with that because it's like, well, you're saying that African Americans have a low mental illness because of mental illness. So it doesn't make a lot of sense there. So I didn't like that explanation at all. And so I wrote that the book refers to these behaviors as smoking, alcohol use, and overeating, overeating unhealthy fatty foods on page 261. The book also claims that on page 261 that these same coping strategies ultimately have negative physical health outcomes. I argue that the low levels of mental illness can be explained by something other than a mental illness known as addiction. The pattern observed of African Americans having high rates of physical illness and low rates of mental illness can be considered the result of individual racism because stress accumulates over time and causes physical illnesses such as hypertension. So, obviously, if you're being discriminated against and you feel that every day, that's stressful. Or if you don't have as many opportunities as all of that experience, of course, yeah, you're gonna have stress, and there are many physical illnesses, immune diseases, like I said, hypertension, heart disease, all sorts of things that are caused by stress. Additionally, I feel the African American community is full of artists of all kinds, and art is a form of expression. Thus, artists may have learned to mentally cope better with stress caused by individual racism. So that was sort of my own explanation to why African Americans would have low mental illness, is that, maybe they have learned to cope with that stress mentally better through forms of expression such as art. And that's what kind of what I thought maybe could be an explanation. However, I am not a sociologist, so I cannot say that with, yeah. So the book, however, notes that individual racism causes stress, which in return results in the engagement of addictive behaviors, causing negative health outcomes. The accumulated stress caused by individual racism is definitely one major contributor of physical illness rates, but not necessarily mental illness being low. And I assume coping through expression leads to low mental illness, while enduring stress from individual racism leads to physical illnesses occurring more often. I'm excited to hear what you guys have to say this week, and yeah, thank you. Bye.